Hello and welcome to Shades and Layers. I'm your host, Kutwanos Kosana Richie, and today my guest is Tadiwa Mwashita, founder of the Italian social impact startup Feedel Africa. They are in the business of providing services to innovation hubs, female-led startups, and nonprofit organizations on the African continent. And some of the services they offer include fundraising, grant writing, and AI education. Our conversation takes us on a journey from Tadiwa's home country, Zimbabwe, to Italy, where she is currently based. It's an account of resilience and testimony to her own strength as an entrepreneur, and that is adaptability. Tadiwa stumbled onto entrepreneurship during high school and hasn't stopped experimenting with ideas ever since. Even now, she's working on a new idea with two business partners. But I think it's better if she tells her own story.
Okay, so the easy part is my name. I'm Tadiwa Mwashita, and I am a serial startup founder and entrepreneur, which is the difficult part because currently I'm wearing many entrepreneurial hats. The main one being as a startup founder for a social impact startup based in Italy that's called Feedel Africa. And I'm just launching a new initiative, which is part of Feedel Africa, sort of, but focused only on female entrepreneurs in Africa. And I also work I have a couple of projects that I'm working on in the pet industry, for example.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Let's start with Feedel. Okay, it's a social impact startup. What does that mean? And how does that manifest in reality?
All right. So as a social impact startup, it's almost like an NGO, but it should be a for-profit company. So in the Italian system, there's so many different types of companies or organizations that you can open. And a social impact company is basically a private company, but that focuses on the social aspect. So in my case, I work with Africans, whether they're African migrants here in Italy or Europe, and Africans in Africa. So just on the social impact environment or sector. So that's what I mean when I say social impact startups. It's a trending terminology that is there right now. So I'm not an NGO and don't work like an NGO. So my job is not to try and provide funding, provide assistance to, less developed communities. I am a for-profit company, but how I make profit by providing services to, for example, NGOs, institutions, organizations, companies.
Okay, I see.
Yes.
Yeah.
But
but your clients then are mainly in the nonprofit sector.
In the entrepreneurial space, actually, because
Right.
I do work with NGOs and with governmental institutions, innovation hubs, incubators, to help them co-design or redesign their innovation hubs and the startups that they're working with, incubators that they're working with, so that they can be at, European or international standards. For what's happening in Africa right now, most of the innovation hubs in like Southern Africa are actually just co-working spaces. They're not real innovation hubs.
Right. So how are you bringing in the innovation, so to speak, to those spaces?
So I was actually hired as an entrepreneur in residence. So Feedel Ventures, which is a venture builder, startup studio, and an investment fund in Italy, decided to create something similar, but only focused on Africa. So using the resources that we have in Feedel Ventures, which is where I started off as a business developer, I just use the services. I look for volunteers within the company, and we use the skills, the companies in our portfolio, like an AI company that does AI training, digital literacy training. And then I offer discounted prices to the organizations. And in some cases where perhaps they don't have money, we can actually, apply for certain grants that are there, whether they are EU grants, USAID grants, local government grants, to fund our project ideas.
Okay. And which countries specifically do you work with?
So at the moment, we've had a project with in Mozambique, in Beira, for the past 2 years that will be coming to a close next year. And as Feedel Africa, we are now going to be working in Zimbabwe, in the Zimbabwean space. So we have some partnerships with some universities like Lupane University, and still exploring possible projects together with the Ministry of Higher Education, and as well as some private institutions. So we've got some projects in the pipeline at the moment. So as a Zimbabwean, of course, the first place you're going to look at is the country where you're from.
Where you come from. Yeah.
Exactly. Where you can knock on doors
you can get around. Yeah.
Exactly. But at the same time, we've got some talks because part of my team is the co-founder of Feedel Ventures. One of the co-founders is on my team of Feedel Africa. And when he's invited to present or to be a guest in some African countries like Tunisia, he goes and he pitches Feedel Africa there as well. So we have some potential projects that we're trying to work on in Tunisia as well. But in that case, what we're doing is trying to connect countries like Tunisia to enter into the Italian market. So there is a big push in Italy right now to try and be international, to try and link with and work with African countries that have potential. So, for example, B2B SaaS companies, startups, or fintech, or if there are any AI startups in Africa, there is potential to get investment for them to do business in Italy, for example, or to partner with Italian startups. So we facilitate those kinds of synergies as well.
Right. I mean, this is quite a change in tone, particularly for Italy. I mean, can you talk through, when you first started out there to where you find yourself now? Because you've always worked in the startup space.
Yep, I've always been in the startup space, I guess, since high school. And so when I came to Italy, it was actually to try and run away from the entrepreneurial scene and try to get a 9-to-5 job in the corporate world, However, it was very challenging given my age and, the prejudices, discrimination, stereotypes that everyone knows exist in Italy. So it was very difficult for me to find employment. So at one point in time, I created my own startup called Dedele, and it died. It was a failed startup. Unfortunately, trying to enter in a man's world as a woman is not so easy sometimes. So admittedly, it failed.
In Italy.
In Italy, because in Zimbabwe it would have worked. But the problem was, the Italian scene is a little bit, traditional when it comes to doing business. So that failure was actually a learning experience. And also with my previous podcast, The African Dream, I was motivated and I learned a lot. And that allowed me to apply for a business developer position at Feedel Ventures. And it was because of my startup and entrepreneurial experience that they hired me.
Yeah.
While working in that company, I worked with at least, I think at one point in time, I had like 7 startups that I was helping doing their business development globally and locally. For example, in different sectors, real estate, sustainable fashion, AI, I think tenders, consultancy. So a whole scope. And so I learned a lot about the different startups that exist in Europe and the potential that Africa also has. Yeah. So, while I was in Feedel Africa, even day one, I told them, look, I want to work, Feedel Ventures, I was like, I want to work in Africa. I want to help the African community because Zimbabwe, I don't know how much you know about the colonialism days of Ian Smith, where at one point in time, we had, I'm forgetting the term for it, but basically Zimbabwe was cut off from, or Rhodesia was cut off from the rest of the world. And we started producing ourselves, our own goods, and we became these strong entrepreneurs and became the breadbasket of Africa, etc., etc. So we've always had that, entrepreneurial mindset in Zimbabwe.
Right.
However, we didn't have the opportunities or the platforms to learn what others are doing. So that is what motivated me to work for Feedel Africa and with Feedel Africa to be like, okay, look, we have the intelligence. Egypt is doing it. Nigeria is doing it. Kenya is doing it. What's stopping SADC, for example, from doing the same thing? Let me just give them that access, that platform, whether it's through training or just matchmaking with other businesses that are complementary. Let's see what we can do.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds great. This is Shades and Layers, and my guest is Tadiwa Mwashita, founder of Feedel Africa, a social impact startup based in Milan, Italy. One of the things I was curious about was how she navigates language and gender challenges in a non-English speaking country. And having lived in Denmark myself, I know that language competence can shape your entire professional experience in the early years of living in a foreign country. So let's hear more from Tadiwa. What's interesting to me is that you mentioned this whole, you mentioned that it's very traditional, the work culture. The one thing that you don't mention is language, because you come from an English speaking country. So that's something that made me curious also, because notoriously, I've lived in Denmark where language barrier was a huge thing that stood in the way of progress, basically. And I think in comparison, Denmark is probably more internationalized, well, kind of, than Italy in terms of, having access to the outside. And also there is a little bit of English within the country. But, Italy, I know when I first started coming there, no one, not a single person even bothered to speak in English. So how has that been for you?
Okay, that's very interesting. Something that I love talking about because, so yes, in Italy, I think only 35% or so of the population of 60 million people speak English. Okay. And it's not really great English as well. Fortunately, I live in Milan, which is the capital city of business. Okay, so
let's be careful here.
Of business,
don't offend the Romans.
No. That's why I said of business.
Sure.
So if you want to do business, you have to be in Milan also, which is why I'm stuck in Milan. So, everyone is kind of forced to speak in English. And to be quite honest, between graduation and working for Feedel, I was an English teacher for, multinational companies. So they wouldn't hire me to be an employee, but they would hire me to teach them business English. Right. And that kind of helped me understand my place in society in the context of Italy and how I could fit in and how I could progress. And that's part of the reason why I got the job at Feedel Ventures, because of my English language skills and my knowledge of, the different industrial sectors. Because before Italy, I worked for a logistics company, I worked for an NGO, and then teaching in multinational companies in Italy. So I kind of knew my way around the different sectors already. And so, right now, my English level is, I would say, lower intermediate, partly intentional, because, sometimes or many times I've been in situations where I try to speak Italian with a non-English accent and I get the asylum seeker treatment, which is not so great. And then when I speak in English, when I speak Italian with an English accent, I get better treatment.
That's interesting.
So I intentionally do it that way. I've never lied to anyone, and I'm very open and honest about it that, in Italy, what works for me personally is to speak English more than Italian. So that is it. It does have its negatives in the sense that there are some job positions I would love to have or apply for, but I don't speak fluent Italian because that's what they want.
Sure.
If they do want you as an international person, they want you to speak fluent Italian, which I don't speak. And naturally, I'm bad at learning languages. So I don't know how many decades it will take for me to speak fluent Italian anyways.
Right. Okay. All right. So that's Fidel. What's your ambition for this company?
For Feedel Africa, I really do believe that let me just say it's been a difficult year. Starting because I started this like November 2023, officially in this position to try and build it, rebranding, coming up with a new vision and services, product offering, and then trying to approach different organizations, institutions, sell the products and services as, Tadiwa from Zimbabwe living in Italy, trying to sell to, these governmental institutions or 40-something, 50-something year old men. And they're like, who are you? Where are you coming from?
Yeah.
And also coming up with my team that I said, look, I do have a team that I work with that I have access to in Italy. But if I'm going to sell to Africa, it needs to be a good combination of Africans and Italians. So I've got my African advisors that I call on and speak to. And then the team I work with are mostly Italian because I'm taking from Feedel Ventures as volunteers and a couple from Ethiopia and Nigeria. So it's been a struggle, but I would say in the past, since end of June, beginning of July, people have started taking me seriously, started, listening, being willing to work on projects together. So that's why I said, I've got some projects in the pipeline that, I'm hoping to have launched in 2025. Some really great projects in the incubation, women entrepreneurship, African events, mainly focused on women now, and also in the AI space, trying to really bring forward the opportunity for Africans to learn how to use, something as simple as Chat GPT for prompt engineering. It's a game changer. Countries like India are already doing it. And they're on platforms like Fiverr charging $20 to do something for you. And then they just use Chat GPT. I'm like, come on, Zimbabweans, you can make some passive income doing exactly the same thing if you learn Chat GPT. So trying to bring that education to especially Southern Africa is something that I'm personally advocating for, as well as mentoring some startups and helping them along the way to win grants, to win competitions. So that's some fantastic stuff.
And then how are you funded? Is it all internal, or do you also employ the same model of going to funders to finance all these, the provision of all these services?
So, yes, as a startup, I apply for funding in Italy, also apply for startup or accelerator opportunities in other European countries or in Africa. However, investors don't actually like investing in social impact startups because as a social impact startup, your goal is not to become a millionaire. Your goal is to help the community, but to bring in enough income to stay afloat. So I do have some investors that I'm in close contact with looking to invest in African startups, but they can't invest in me because they're like, look, we want to make money. We want to invest in something that we can sell, a startup that we can sell at the end of the day, and a social impact startup isn't that.
Why did you choose a social impact format? Like, what's your attraction to this space?
Well, at the moment, realistically, complete, honesty, transparency. I was fired as a business developer by Feedel Ventures and hired as an entrepreneur in residence because I had to work in Italian. And again, as an international employee working with Italian companies, they feel much better working with an Italian who speaks fluent Italian and can switch, between English and Italian. But on the business side, I do really well on entrepreneurship. So that's how this opportunity
was a way to keep
came
you
about. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Some organizations see it as corporate social responsibility by working with Feedel Africa as well. So they pay for us to help them in whatever activities that they have. And working as a social impact startup gives me the opportunity to then also work on personal projects, personal projects that can bring in my millions one day, I hope.
Great. Let's talk about those projects. You said you're doing something in the pet space. Tell me a bit more about that venture.
Okay, so this is kind of like still in the pipeline. I've always had a passion for pets and have been exploring this for quite a few months now, which is kind of like how I went to Zurich in the past month and a half. It was also partly research, testing the market, seeing what opportunities are there. And Zurich is the most innovative country in the world right now. So learning from the biggest innovation minds is, what that was my opportunity. So it's a product and a service, two-pronged approach. I'm offering products and I'm offering services in the pet space. I don't want to give away too much because I haven't launched it yet. Okay, I literally finished the prototype today.
Tell me.
I literally, I launched the prototype, not launched, but I created the prototype today. I have 2 partners already, one from Kenya, one from Italy, all women team. And Italy is a pet dream.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so
another place with more dogs than humans. Yeah.
Yes. There are 14 million registered pets in Italy. Registered. So
that's like
I won't
half
even
the
talk
population. Yeah. Jeez.
Yes, there are more pets than born babies. Apparently. So it's a very big space that's there and a market with a lot of opportunities. So I'm very excited. Positive feedback. I came up with my idea, pitched it to a couple of people, and they were like, yeah, I want to be with you in this project as one of your partners. And we've just been working through it for like a month and a half. So time is money. And
sure. Yeah. So what's your methodology as an entrepreneur? Like, where do you find your ideas, first of all, and how do you put them together?
Number one is, okay, so I started off in the entrepreneurial space when I was in Zimbabwe. And for example, junior achievement in high school, we had our little business.
Yeah, I remember that from my own high school. Yeah.
Yeah, I was the CEO. Apparently, I looked good as a boss. And then at Solusi University, I was in a transportation kind of project that I went into. Most of the projects I've been in have never been for profit, but to serve a need. So with the transportation thing as well, there was a need. We wanted to go home, and I was able to solve the problem of logistics of people going home. And it ended up being profit making. And then from there, I dabbled in cake baking, like every other woman these days in Southern Africa. But I was really bad at decorating, to be quite honest. I was horrible at decorating. I'm not artistic. So instead, I did my research and I found a product that could be sold, like edible prints.
Yeah.
So I bought the machine, borrowed money from my mom, bought the machine from some company I didn't know in South Africa. And then I started learning how to print, edible prints like Cinderella or people's, faces. And
Awesome.
at the time, it was a new thing in Zimbabwe. And I started it. My brother took over because I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. So I got the opportunity to go to Angola to work for an NGO. My brother continues the business successfully, and I'm still jealous.
Well, you started it.
I did. So, I've always believed that business ideas are not, especially people don't wake up and know exactly what kind of business that they want. Sometimes you start off with one thing, which in my case was baking cakes, teaching people how to bake cakes. And then I saw a weakness in myself and my product, and another idea came from that. So same thing with the pet industry. I didn't see it as I want to be in the pet space. I was actually looking just for a way to escape Milan in summer and the heat and get some fresh air and travel. And I was doing research and I discovered the pet world and the opportunities that the pet industry has. And that's when I was like, oh, interesting. Let me, dive deep into this. Let me play around with this. In my past, I did dabble in rabbit breeding. So
Wow.
I kind of have some experience with taking care of
With
pets.
livestock or animals, yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. And so again, it's never something that you think about for many months, but something that one day comes to you and you say, look, let me really research into this. What are the strengths, opportunities, weaknesses, SWOT analysis?
What's your strength as an entrepreneur, would you say? As a reluctant entrepreneur, I should say.
My strength is I adapt. I'm quite flexible. I think that's something that I also learned during my time as business developer in Feedel Ventures, which really helped me a lot, which was you can start off today as, Feedel Africa, right? Feedel Africa services all Africans. But it was through Feedel Africa that we were like, look, we're forgetting the female space. Female entrepreneurship space is quite big. Let's focus on helping female entrepreneurs. There's so many of them. Most of the informal businesses in Africa are actually by females. They just don't have the support for financing, support for learning or platforms. They just need to learn about e-commerce platforms, etc. So you adapt and you develop into something bigger. You learn from your mistakes. Don't quit. Take a step back, take a month, take 5 years. Dedele was 3-4 years ago. And I just sat and I said, look, I want to get into business, but I need to have the right product that I want to sell, that I believe in, that can work. And I'm not an IT expert, so I can't, create some AI tool, some AI company.
Right.
But I'm a product person. So that's what I look for.
Yeah. Okay. That's very nice. That's a really, really great.
Hey, this is Shades and Layers. Up next, we'll get to hear more about how Tadiwa built up and continues to strengthen her entrepreneurial mindset, what success means to her, what it means to thrive abroad, as well as Shades and Layers Rapid Fire.
So someone wants to follow in your footsteps, and just be adaptable, thrive in a foreign country. How would you advise them to go about it?
Would I call myself thriving in Italy? I think now I'm in a good place today. A year ago, no. So I would say the advice I would give to someone is really think carefully about the country that you're in and what opportunities are possible and are there and can work for you, and do not copy. The problem that I found with a lot of people and, trying to motivate people to be innovative is, I'll give you a perfect example of another project that I've kind of partnered in. My brother came to me and he wanted to get into the cheese making industry. And he said, well, I want to make Gouda and cheddar in Zimbabwe. And I said, well, you can't do that because, if you go to every supermarket, you can already find Gouda and cheddar. Try to make something unique, something different that is your brand. So that is the mindset that I try to encourage people to do. So my brother now is, actually it was the wife that came to my brother and then he came to me. So
always the woman.
So yes, she entered the competition because I encouraged her and I said, well, it's your idea. It's not my idea. It's not my brother's idea. It's your idea. Let's do this. Let me support you. Let me help you with this. And she actually made it to the top 15 finals of Zimbabwe for the Total Energies Startuppers Challenge. And again, the thing is, she was afraid to talk to me about it because she didn't think that it was possible. She had to go through my brother, who then talked to me. And I said, well, your idea is great. Why are you limiting yourself? Why are you afraid to put yourself out there? You're afraid to take that leap. Do your research. If the interest on the market is there, why not? Try it out. You have nothing to lose.
Yeah, yeah. So you advise be innovative, think carefully about the country where you find yourself. Can you expand on that part? Like, think carefully about the country where you find yourself.
Okay, so I'll give again the example of my sister-in-law. The reason why she loved the cheese industry was because I went home with some Italian cheese about a couple of years ago. And, I gave samples of the snacks. Everyone was used to cheddar and Gouda and feta. And suddenly I brought cheeses like Grana Padano and Pecorino. And I talked about mozzarella all the time. So she tasted it and she was like, oh, this taste is actually pretty great. I would love something like that for Zimbabwe. But in her mind, she was thinking, how open are people when it comes to this? I do want cheese. I do think there's a possibility to make it. Also, the price points that I told her of Italy. But then she was afraid. Fear of the unknown, wanting to only stick to the traditional ways of making peanut butter, with the grinding, the stone grinding thing. And once the machine came out, people were still like, no, I want to do it the old-fashioned way, because I know it works. So just taking that leap, you yourself like it. Why do you think someone else won't like it? And sometimes innovation doesn't have to be you are the only person in the whole wide world who has created it. Sometimes innovation is, for example, we have PayPal internationally. And in Italy, some some founders came up with an Italian version called Satispay, which in my opinion is exactly like PayPal. But they're the only ones to bring it to the Italian market. Same thing with Prosecco. The rules, Prosecco is Italian from a specific region of Italy, Veneto. But international rules say that if no one has brought Prosecco to your country or Italian Prosecco to your country and you decide to start selling your wine as Prosecco as number one, it's internationally accepted. That's why now we have Prosecco from Australia, Prosecco from Albania, because they were like, hey, I like that idea. I'm going to make my own.
They didn't follow the champagne law.
No, because Italy also wasn't smart enough to kind of like put laws into place. That's the thing. If you act slow, you give the opportunity for someone else to just introduce your idea in their country. So that is sometimes innovation. You are just the first person to bring something. So in my sister-in-law's case, she's not, she's bringing the innovative aspect of African cheese.
Yeah, doing cheese differently. Sure. Yeah.
Exactly. But it's cheese. It's cheese.
Absolutely. Yeah. Cool. So let's get into the rapid fire. And first question is, if you had to write your memoir today, what would you call it and why?
The grass isn't always greener on the other side.
Okay.
I think it's self-explanatory. Because sometimes, we always assume, and I think a lot of people have been talking about it, that what you see on social media isn't always the grass is greener on that side. And for me to be in this place that I am in today, in 2024, since 2016, I can think of the many nights and the many months where I was like, will I have a salary? Will I have an income next month? Because I came to Italy thinking that it was better and offered way more opportunities than Zimbabwe. Of course, yes. It ultimately did. But now I've got the second part, which is, okay, now I'm in Italy. I have to stay in Italy till I'm 65 to get my pension. If I leave Italy before retirement, I'm going to lose my pension fund and then I'll go back to Zimbabwe and I'm stuck. So is it greener to be in Italy or is it greener to be in Zimbabwe where your family is, where if things go wrong, they can take care of you?
Yeah, that's the immigrant dilemma.
Yes, as a startup, there are some funds that are there which I can't access, or I'll have I have difficulties in accessing simply because I don't have a family backer in Italy. So sometimes there are some funds in Italy for startups to get 80% funding, but you need to show some collateral.
Okay, got it. And who would your choice be for lead actress if you had to make that book into a movie?
So I've recently, that's a difficult one because I love Danai Gurira.
Oh,
Mishon. I love her. I think she's a very strong woman, also because she's Zimbabwean. But at the same time, I've been following Lupita Nyong'o, the movies that she's been making, like A Quiet Place 3, and now she's got a podcast. She does a lot of traveling in Africa, and she's very relatable to me as a person, as a Black woman. Rana is more quiet, but she's Zimbabwean, but she plays very strong characters in Wakanda, The Avengers, and, The Walking Dead. So I would have to see who would be willing to be.
She's also quite the activist, Danai. She's quite the activist also. So
but she does it kind of like in the background.
She's very low key, but she does some really impactful work.
She does. No, I don't discount that at all. It's just like I'm saying with Lupita, she's really pushing forward right now, like at the forefront.
So. Yeah.
Listen. This is Africa. This is the African experience. Blah blah blah. People, I've got the platform. I want you to listen. I'm going to make you pay attention. She has American citizenship now. And she could disappear and be more American, but she hasn't forgotten her African roots. And like I said, I just started really supporting her. In the past, that was 99% mission.
Yeah. Cool. So how do you define success?
Success is, that's a difficult one. Oh my gosh. For me today, what I see as me being successful is being 100% happy. So the day I'm 100% happy, I will be successful. I will be successful, because how do you achieve happiness? That is the ultimate question. I wake up, I would say 70% happy now. Really difficult to be happy in rainy, cloudy weather, in Milan, cold weather. It really affects your mood. It's really difficult when you're a startup because, this before you become rich and successful, especially with a social impact startup, every day there's a constant fighting for clients, fighting to be accepted and recognized, and getting bashed by people because they don't understand you, or they look at you and say, oh, this African woman, what can she teach me? It's really difficult to be happy. And also in my recent trip to Zurich, I did see that classism plays an important part in happiness. You can buy happiness to an extent. And to buy happiness, you must be financially successful. So
you want all the right things in place.
Exactly. So everything, socially, romantically, financially, emotionally, to be happy in all those aspects. Once I achieve that, I will be successful.
Okay. All right. And if somebody wants to work with you, enlist your services, or just, give you money, where can they find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn, Tadiwa, Tadiwa, Linet, Linet, Mwashita on LinkedIn. I will always respond to LinkedIn messages. And I think that's the easiest way to see me and my profile and what we do as Feedel Africa.
That's great. Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate you giving me your time.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited, and I'm actively looking for female entrepreneurs with ideas and projects that want to get some advice, mentorship, looking for finance. As I mentioned before, we do actually work or have some investment partners that are willing to invest in African entrepreneurs.
And that is all from me this time around. Thanks to Tadiwa for her generous account of her journey so far. I can't wait to hear what she'll do next. And thanks to you also for listening. Please visit the show notes to learn more about her work. And while you are there, please rate and review the podcast so that others can find us. 5 stars would be amazing. Thank you. I'm Kutwanos Kosana Richie, and until next time, please do take good care.